Welcome back. I'll go ahead and start up from day 8. I've got my new laptop, and we're going to be starting from the Jataka tables. And I'm going to be starting from book 1, the stories of the Buddha's former births, and I'm going to be using very old Robert Chalmers translations. This discourse regarding truth was delivered by the Blessed One while he was dwelling in the great monastery at Jetvana near Savatthi. But who, you ask, was it that led up to this tale? Well, it was the treasurer's 500 friends, disciples of the Sophists. For one day, Anatha Pindaka, the treasurer, took his friends, the 500 disciples of other schools, and went off with them to Jetvana, whether also he whither he also he had a great store brought of garlands, perfumes, unguents, together with oil, honey, molasses, cloths, and cloaks. After due salutations to the Blessed One, he made his offering to him of the garlands and the like, and handed over to the order of the brethren the medicinal oil and so forth, together with the cloths, and this done, he took his seat on one side, eschewing the 6 faults, and sitting down. Likewise, those disciples of other schools saluted the Buddha and took their seats close by the side of Anathapindika, gazing upon the Master's countenance, glorious as the full moon, upon his excellent presence endowed with the signs and marks of Buddhahood, and encompassed to a fathom's length with light, and upon the rich glory that marks a Buddha, a glory which issued as it were in paired garlands, paired upon pair. Then, though in thunderous tones, as of a young lion roaring in the red valley, or as storm clouds in the rainy season, bringing down, as it were, the Gangas of the heavens, and seeming to weave a chaplet of jewels, yet in a voice of eightfold perfection, the charm of which ravished the ear, he preached to them the truth in a discourse full of sweetness and bright with varied beauty. They, after hearing the Master's discourse, rose up with hearts converted, and with due salutations to the Lord of Knowledge, burst asunder the other doctrines in which they had taken refuge, and betook themselves to the Buddha as their refuge. Henceforth, without ceasing, they used to go with Anatha Pindika, carrying in their hands perfumes and garlands and the like, to hear the truth in the monastery, and they abounded in charity, kept the commandments, and kept the weekly fast day. Now the Blessed One went from Savatthi back to Rajgara again. As soon as the Buddha had gone, they burst asunder their new faith, and returning to their other doctrines as their refuge, reverted to their original state. After some 7 or 8 months' stay, the Blessed One came back to Jetavana. Once again, too, did Anatha Pindika come with those friends of his to the Master, make his salutations and offerings of perfumes and the like, and take his seat on one side. And the friends also saluted the Blessed One, and took their seats in like manner. Then did Anatha Pindika tell the Blessed One how, when the Buddha had departed on his alms pilgrimage, his friends had forsaken their refuge for the old doctrines again, and had reverted to their original state. Opening the lotus of his mouth, as though it were a casket of jewels, scented with the scents divine, and filled with diverse perfumes, in virtue of his having ever spoken aright throughout myriad aeons, the Blessed One made his sweet voice come forth, as he inquired, "Is the report true, that you, disciples, have forsaken the 3 refuges for the refuge of other doctrines?" And when they, unable to conceal the fact, had confessed, saying, "It is true, Blessed One," then said the Master, "Disciples, not between the bounds of hell below and the highest heavens above, not in all the infinite worlds that stretch right and left, is there the equal, much less the superior, of a Buddha in the excellences which spring from obeying the commandments and from other virtuous conduct? Then he declared to them the excellence of the three gems as they revealed as they are revealed in the sacred texts, the following amongst the number: all of creation, of all creatures, brethren, whether footless, etc. Of these the Buddha is the chief. Whatsoever riches there be in this or in other worlds, etc., and verily the chief of the faithful. Hence he went on to say, no disciples, male or female, who seek refuge in the three gems that are endowed with such peerless excellences, are ever reborn into hell in the like states, but released from all rebirth into states of sufferings. They pass to the realm of the Devas, and there rejoice great glory. Therefore, in forsaking such a refuge, for that offered by other doctrines, you have gone astray. And here the following sacred text should be cited to make it clear that none who, to find release in the supreme good, have sought refuge in the three gems shall be reborn into states of suffering. Those who have refuge in the Buddha found shall not pass hence to states of suffering. Straightway, when they shall quit their human frame, a deva form these faithful ones shall fill. Those who have refuge in the doctrine found, etc., etc. The same things. Those who have refuge in the order found the same thing. They're manifold the refuge men seek, the mountain peak, the forest solitude, and so on down to when he, this refuge, shall have sought and found entire release is from every pain. But the master did not end his teachings to them at this point, for he went on to say, disciples, meditation on the thought of the Buddha, meditation on the thought of the truth, meditation on the thought of brotherhood, that gives entry. This it is that gives entry to and fruition of the first, the second, the third, and the fourth paths to bliss, which I suspect are the Four Noble Truths. And when he had preached the truth to them in these and other ways, I said that I suspect that. I didn't just read that, sorry. He said, in forsaking such a refuge as this, you have gone astray. And here the gift of the several paths to those who meditate on the thought of the Buddha and so forth should be made clear by such scriptures as the following. One thing there is, brethren, which, if practiced and developed, conducts to utter loathing of the world's vanities, to the cessation of passion, to the end of being, to peace, to insight, to enlightenment, to nirvana. What is this one thing? The meditation on the thoughts of Buddha. When he had thus exhorted the disciples, the Blessed One said, so too in time past, disciples, the men who jumped to the fatuous conclusion that what was no refuge was a real refuge, fell a prey to goblins in a demon-haunted wilderness, and were utterly destroyed, whilst the men who clave to the absolute and indisputable truth prospered in the same wilderness. And when he had said this, he became silent. Then rising up from his seat and saluting the Blessed One, the layman Anathapindika burst into praises, and with clasped hands raised and reverenced to his forehead spoke thus: it is clear to us, sir, that in these present days these disciples were led by error into forsaking the supreme refuge, but the bygone destruction of those opinionated ones in the demon-haunted wilderness, and the prospering of men who clave to the truth, are hidden from us and known only to you. May it please the Blessed One as though causing the full moon to rise in the sky, to make this thing clear to us. Then said the Blessed One, it was solely to brush away the world's difficulties, that by the display of the 10 perfections through myriad aeons I won omnipotence. Give ear and hearken as closely as if you were filling a tube of gold with lion's marrow. Having thus excited the treasurer's attention, he made clear the thing that rebirth had concealed from me, as though he was releasing the full moon from the upper air, the birthplace of the snows. Once on a time in the city of Benares, in Nakasi country, there was a king named Brahmadatta. In those days, the Bodhisattva was born into a merchant's family, and growing up in due course used to journey about trading with 500 carts, traveling now from east to west, now from west to east. There was also at Benares another young merchant, a stupid blockhead, lacking resource. Now at that time of our story, the Bodhisattva had loaded 500 carts with costly wares of Benares and had got them all ready to start. And so had the foolish young merchant too, thought the Bodhisattva. Though the Bodhisattva, is this foolish young merchant? If this foolish young merchant keeps me company all along, and 1,000 carts travel along together, it will be too much for the road. It will be a hard matter to get wood, water, and so forth for the men, or grass for the oxen. Either he or I must go on first. So he set for the other and laid his view before him, saying, the two of us cannot travel together. Would you rather go first or last? Thought the other. There will be many advantages if I go first. I shall have a road which is not yet cut up. My oxen will have pick of the grass, my men will have pick of the herbs for curry, and water will be undisturbed. And lastly, I shall fix my own price for the barter of my goods. Accordingly, he replied, I will go first, my dear sir. The Bodhisattva, on the other hand, saw many advantages in going last, for he argued thus to himself, those who go first will level the road where it is rough, while I shall travel along the road they have already traveled. Their oxen will have grazed off the coarse old grass, while mine will pasture on the sweet young growth, which will spring up in its place. My men will find fresh growth of sweet herbs for curry, where the old ones have been picked. Where there is no water, the first caravan will have to dig to supply themselves, and you shall drink at the wells they dug. Haggling over prices is killing work, whereas I, following later, shall barter my wares at the price they have already fixed. Accordingly, seeing all these advantages, he said to the other, then you go first, my dear sir. Very well, I will, said the foolish merchant, and he yoked his carts and set out, journeying along. He left human habitations behind him and came to the outskirts of wilderness. Now wildernesses are on the five following kinds: robber wilderness, wild beast wilderness, drought wilderness, demon wilderness, and famine wilderness. The first is when the way is beset by robbers. The second is when the way is beset by lions and other wild beasts. The third is where there is no bathing or water to be got. The fourth is when the road is beset by demons. And the fifth is where no roots or other food are to be found. And in this fivefold category, the wilderness in question was both a drought and a demon wilderness. Accordingly, this young merchant took great water jars on his cart, and filling them with water, set out to cross the 60 leagues of desert which lay before him. Now, when he had reached the middle of the wilderness, the goblin who haunted it said to himself, I will make these men throw away their stock of water, and devour them all when they are faint. So he framed so he framed by his magic power a delightful carriage drawn by pure white young bulls, with a retinue of some 10 or 12 goblins bearing bows and quivers, swords and shields. He rode along to meet them like a mighty lord in this carriage, with blue lotuses and white water lilies weathered round his head, with wet hair and wet clothes, and with muddy carriage wheels. His attendants too, in front and rear of him, went along with their hair and clothes wet, with garlands of blue lotuses and white water lilies on their beds, and with bunches of white lotuses in their hands, chewing the esculent stalks and dripping with water and mire. Now the leaders of caravans have the following custom. Whenever the wind blows in their teeth, they ride on in front of the carriage with their attendants round them, in order to escape the dust. But when the wind blows from behind them, then they ride in like fashion in the rear of the column. And as on this occasion the wind was blowing against them, the young merchant was riding in front. When the goblin became aware of the merchant's approach, he drew his carriage aside from the track and greeted him kindly, asking him whether he was going whither he was going. The leader of the caravan too caused his carriage to be drawn aside from the track, so as to let the carts pass by, whilst he stayed by the way, and thus addressed the goblin. We are just on our way from Benares, sir, but I observe that you have lotuses and water lilies on your heads and in your hands, and that your people are chewing the esculent stalks, and that you are all muddy and dripping wet. Pray, did it rain while you were on the road, and did you come on pools covered with lotuses and water lilies? Hereon the goblin exclaimed, What did you say? Why, yonder appears the dark green streak of the forest, and hence onward there is nothing but water all through the forest. It is always raining there. The pools are full, and on every side are lakes covered with lotuses and water lilies. Then, as the line of carts passed by, he asked rather where they were bound for. To such and such place, was the reply. And what wares have you got in this cart, and in this? So and so. And what might you have in the last cart, which seems to move as if it were heavy laden? Oh, there's water in that. You did well to carry water with you from the other side. There is no need for it now, as water is abundant on ahead. So break the jars and throw the water away, that you may travel easier. And he added, Now continue on your way, as we have stopped too long already. Then he went a little ways further on, till he was out of sight, when he made his way back to the goblin city where he dwelt. Such was the folly that the foolish merchant that he did the goblin's bidding, and had his jars broken and the water all thrown away, without saving so much even as would go in the palm of a man's hand. Then he ordered the carts to drive on. Not a drop of water did they find on the head, and thirst exhausted the men all day long till the sun went down, and they kept on the march. But at sunset they unyoked their carts and made a large teetering of oxen, tethering, made a lunger, teetering the oxen to the wheels. The oxen had no water to drink, and the men none to cook their rice with, and the tired out bank sand to the ground to slumber. But as soon as night fell, the goblins came out of their city and slew every single one of those men and oxen. And when they had devoured their flesh, leaving only bare bones, the goblins departed. Thus was the foolish young merchant the sole cause of the destruction of that whole band, whose skeletons were strewn in every conceivable direction, whilst the 500 carts stood there with their loads untouched. Now the Bodhisattva allowed some 6 weeks to pass by after the starting of the foolish young merchant. Before he set out, then he proceeded from the city with his 500 carts, and in due course came to the outskirts of the wilderness. Here he had his water jars filled and laid and an ample stock of water, and by beat of the drum he had his men assembled in camp, and thus addressed them, let not so much as a palmful of water be used without my sanction. There are poison trees in this wilderness, so let no man among you eat any leaf, flower, or fruit which he has not eaten before, without first asking me. When this extortion, when this exhortation to his men, with this exhortation to his men, he pushed on into the wilderness with his 500 carts. When he had reached the middle of the wilderness, the goblin made his appearance on the bodhisattva's path, as in the former case. But as soon as he became aware of the goblin, the bodhisattva saw through him, for he thought to himself, "There's no water here in this waterless desert. The person with this red eyes and aggressive bearing casts no shadow. Very likely he has induced the foolish young merchant who preceded me to throw away all his water, and when waiting till they were worn out, has eaten up the merchant with all his men. But he doesn't know my cleverness and ready wit." Then he shouted to the goblin, "Begone! We're men of business, and do not throw away what water we have got, before we see where more is to come from. But when we do see more, we may be trusted to throw this water away and lighten our carts." The goblin rode on a bit farther till he was out of sight, and then betook himself back to his home in the demon city. But when the goblin had gone, the bodhisattva's men said to him, "Sir, we heard from those men that yonder is the dark green streak of the forest appearing, where they said it was always raining. They had got lotuses on their heads and water lilies in their hands, and were eating the stalks which their clothes and hair were wringing wet, with water streaming off them. Let us throw away our water and get on a bit quicker with lightened carts." On hearing these words, the bodhisattva ordered a halt, and had the men all mustered. "Tell me," he said, "did any man among you ever hear before today that there was a lake or a pool in this wilderness?" "No, sir," was the answer. "Why, it's known as the waterless desert. We have just been told by some people that it is raining just on ahead, in the belt of the forest. Now, how far does a rain wind carry?" "A league, sir." "And has this rain wind reached any one of our men?" "No, sir." "How far can you see the crest of a storm cloud?" "A league." "And has anyone here seen the top of even a single storm cloud?" "No, sir." "How far can one see a flash of lightning?" 4 or 5 leagues, sir." "And has any man seen a flash of lightning?" "No, sir." "How far can a man hear a peal of thunder?" 2 or 3 leagues, sir." "And has any man here heard the peal of thunder?" "No, sir." "These are not men, but goblins. They will return in the hope of devouring us when we are weak and faint after throwing away our water, their bidding. As the young merchant who went before us was not a man of resource, most likely he had been fooled into throwing away his water, and had been devoured when exhaustion ensued. We may expect to find his 500 carts standing just as they were loaded for the start, and we shall come on them today. Press on with all possible speed without throwing away a drop of water." Urging his men forward with these words, he proceeded on his way till he came upon the 500 carts standing just as they had been loaded, and the skeletons of the men and oxen laying strewn in every direction. He had his carts unyoked and ranged in a circle so as to form a strong linger. He saw that his men and oxen had their supper early, and that the oxen were made to lie down in the middle, with the men round them, and he himself with the leading men of his band stood on guard, sword in hand, through the 3 watches of the night, waiting for the day to dawn. On the morrow at daybreak, when he had his oxen fed and everything needful done, he discarded his own weak carts for stronger ones, and his own common goods for the most costly of the derelict goods. Then he went on to his destination, where he bartered his stock for wares of 2 or 3 times their value, and came back to his own city without losing a single man out of his company. The story ended, Master said. Thus it was, layman, that in times past the fascists came to utter destruction, whilst those who clave to the truth, escaping from the demon's hands, reached their goal in safety and came back to their homes again. And when he had thus linked the two stories together, he, as the Buddha, spoke the following stanza for the purpose of the lesson on truth. Then some declared the soul the peerless truth, but otherwise the false logicians spoke. Let him that's wise from this a lesson take, and firmly grasp the soul, the peerless truth. Thus did the Blessed One teach this lesson respecting truth, and he went on to say, what is called walking by truth not only bestows the three happy endowments, the six heavens of the realm of sense, and the endowment of the higher realm of Brahma, but finally is the giver of arhatship, whilst what is called walking by untruth entails rebirth in the four states of punishment, or in the lowest castes of mankind. Further, the Master went on to expound in 16 ways the four truths, at the close of which all of those 500 disciples were established in the fruit of the first path. Having delivered his lesson and his teachings, and having told the two stories and established the connection linking them together, the Master concluded by identifying the birth as fellows. Devadatta was the foolish merchant of those days. His followers were the followers of that merchant. The followers of the Buddha were the followers of that wise merchant who was himself, who was myself. And that's the end. I'd like to thank everybody who's stayed along and listened to that. May you forever be well.